Alright, that was a pretty cool episode. Episode 5 of The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 has premiered on Amazon Prime Video. So now I talk about it with big time spoilers this time. So big spoiler warning, if you have not watched this episode yet and you're planning on it, then please fly away because I will be talking about what happens in this episode in detail. If you have watched it or you don't care, then you are good to go. Alright, so let's get right into this because this episode gets right into it. It begins with the 7 dwarven rings already forged. I was like, oh, okay, not gonna show more of the forging process like you did for the Elven Rings in the finale of Season 1? Alright, fair enough, I guess. I mean, they do look awesome. But something I like about the ring design in this show is that they each look really special and unique. I don't know, they just look really cool. The Elven Rings and now the Dwarven Rings. And so King Durin III gets his hands on his ring and man, he immediately starts to fall for his ring's power. Because at first it does seem to help. It helps them find where to dig into the walls to get the light back into the caves back in Khazad-dûm. So it all seems well and great. But I remember what those rings did to those dwarves. This is Tolkien lore. They gave the dwarves that greed, that lust for jewelry. It came from those rings of power. And so that's what's happening to King Durin III here. Yeah, he starts losing it a little bit. He's talking to Narvi. He's like, we gotta dig deeper. Wait, who set these restrictions? And Narvi's like, you did. And the king's like, all right, well, screw them. We're gonna keep digging because there's gold right beneath us. Even his son, Prince Durin IV, was like, greed was never his way. It's just that damn ring. Yeah, Prince Durin IV, he becomes really weary of those rings, just like his friend Elrond. I like that both he and Elrond are kind of on the same page about the rings because the two of them are friends. It's a pretty cool coincidence that they both share the same mindset. I wonder if that'll lead to something between them. There is that scene where Diza's down there in the caves and she senses something deeper down. Yeah, we assess that is the Balrog that we saw last season. I've been wondering, especially since we saw it in the trailers for this season, where is it? I'm sure it'll rear its head somewhere towards the end, but man, the tension is killing me. There is a pretty great Easter egg in this episode when the dwarves are all in Eregion and they're like, let's celebrate our union. Here's a new project that we've been working on. And they unveil the Doors of Durin. I was like, okay, that's great. Because you do assess that, yeah, these are the same Doors of Durin that we will see later on in the Fellowship of the Ring. You remember when Frodo figures out the password? That's awesome. That does explain why the dwarves have some elvish made thing here. I appreciate that actually, because I have wondered about that. So now that we're in Eregion, let's touch on Sauron and Celebrimbor. Since now that these 7 dwarven rings have been made, Anatar is like, let's keep going. Come on, buddy, let's make some rings for men already. What's stopping us? Trust me, it'll be awesome. And I do love the fact that Celebrimbor needs some convincing here. He does at first stand by his word. He's like, I'm sorry, but my answer is no, I don't want to do this. We've done great things already. Let's not overcook it here. And so Sauron is pretty much like Thanos here. He's like, fine, I'll do it myself. And so they get started on these rings and it seems like one of them has a pretty dark side effect. This was really cool because at first I didn't know what was happening. We see these objects moving by themselves. I was like, what? Is there a ghost now all of a sudden here? It didn't occur to me that these rings are doing what we know them to do, at least for men and lesser folk, which is they turn people invisible and cause them to see this world but shrouded in mist and darkness. That's what happened to this one elf maiden here. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, they're working, they're doing their jobs. The rings, that is. And so Sauron uses that to his advantage here when it comes to convincing Celebrimbor. He's like, yeah, it's because you wrote that letter lying to your high king about closing your forge. So there was that veil of deception when it came to forging these rings. So you got 2 choices here. You can either tell the truth to your king, in which he will probably never allow you to forge anything ever again, or we press on and continue with the deception. I was like, man, oh man, Sauron, that is dark. You are so good at what you're doing. Because now Celebrimbor knows that he is committing evil acts. He knows that what he's doing is wrong and he is rightfully frightened. And I love that shit, man. It's just Sauron is so good at being the deceiver. He's getting his way and he is getting his rings no matter what. That's awesome. And so once more onto the breach, my dear fellows. The forging of the 9 rings for the race of men begins. Wonder if they'll be finished by the next episode. We do know that one of them is going to be in the design of one serpent devouring another, because that's the one that'll eventually be Aragorn's. Can't wait to see how that one looks in this show. But man, oh man, just poor Celebrimbor, dude. We've seen in the trailers that he is going to have a breaking point where he just breaks down and cries. That's going to be tough to watch, and that's what it had to be. He's supposed to be driven to that point because that's just the power that Sauron holds over another. It's so good, dude. This was probably my favorite arc in this episode. Meanwhile, finally back in Numenor, since we weren't there last week, Baruzan is the new king, and sure enough, as we all predicted, he is a douchebag. And so is his son, Kemen. Man, just this is the episode where we get to see just how much of a dick he is. I mean, granted, he's no Joffrey from Game of Thrones or anything, but you know, for Lord of the Rings standards, he's pretty bad. And Eärien as well, which stings just a little bit more because, after all, she is Elendil's daughter. The way she's talking back to him, ugh, they are at odds, and I do like the fact that Elendil is holding his ground. That was cool, good for him. Beliefs over blood, that's how we roll in Numenor, I guess. And I'll tell you what, you remember how I said last week that I wasn't buying the romance between Isildur and Estrid. There is a romance in the show that I am buying, and it's the one between Miriel and Elendil. Cause who are we kidding? There is totally a spark of romance there, and I do like it actually. Cause it has had that slow build-up since season 1. He has been there for her through her recovery after losing her sight. He's always been loyal to her, and that's cool. And she definitely sees it in him too, figuratively speaking. What can I say? I'm rooting for them. Now let's just hope she doesn't get hit by an orc arrow and die between seasons. Too soon? There is a point later on in the episode where there's this service going on. It's like it looks like a funeral or something, and Kemen interrupts like the dick he is, and that all leads to a shit show in which ultimately he kills Valandil. You remember him? He was Isildur's friend last season. He's remained loyal to the Queen Miriel and Elendil, and he ended up giving his life for it. That scene was well done for sure, but I personally just didn't really care that much for this character in particular, I'll be honest. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that sucks, he's dead. Moving on, I guess. And then Elendil is arrested, so that sucks. Wonder what anyone's gonna do about that, if anyone can. Miriel, I think it's your turn. Let's see what you got. The episode ends by going back to Galadriel briefly. We see that indeed she is in that cage, and she's let out, and Adar comes up to her, and he's basically like, whoa, take it easy, sweetheart. I didn't bring you here to fight. I brought you here because we got ourselves a common enemy. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, that technically is true. At least for now it is. Adar does hate Sauron after all. So I guess we'll see where that goes. Is there gonna be like a temporary alliance between the two of these characters? I really doubt it. It's not gonna be easy to convince Galadriel to work with orcs. But I don't know. That is interesting though. My favorite quote from this episode was a pretty sick burn. And it's from Elendil. It's after Eärien tells him, you are walking a treacherous path. To which he responds, and yours is made of seawater. Take care to keep your feet beneath you. It's a long way to the bottom. I was like, that's an awesome line. This is pretty sick. So in the end, this 5th episode of The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 is probably my favorite so far. It was a great one. Tensions are rising. We are getting further and further in Sauron's master plan. Rings are getting forged. And it has me wondering how this season is gonna end. Like, with what event? Can't wait to see. So, The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 5, Halls of Stone. Have you watched it yet? What are your thoughts on it? And what are your theories and predictions for next week? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!